Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our podcast, a YouTube video talking about the automotive space, specifically dealerships and what they should look like and how they may operate in the future when we think about sustainability. I'm joined by some great guests today. I'm going to do a brief introduction and then I'll ask the three of you to maybe tell the audience a little bit more about yourselves and your experience, and then we'll jump into some Q&A. So to my left, we have James Burrow, Director of Sustainable Finance here at Bank of Montreal. To my right, we have Silvia Carfora, President and CEO of Weis Group. And to her right, we have Ethan Goldberg, our VP and Market Leader for Ontario and Atlantic. Before we get into the Q&A, talk a little bit about your role in sustainable finance.
Yeah, I'm going to be nice and quick. My role is really for our commercial and capital markets clients to create new sustainable finance products and offerings that help them decarbonize and accelerate their journey towards net zero.
Silvia, over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having us here today. I'm Silvia Carfora. We work with, the Weis Group works with automotive OEMs and their dealers to help implement brand standards and assess brand standards, ensuring there's consistency across the entire network.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm Ethan Goldberg. By way of introduction, I lead the commercial sales team for Ontario and Atlantic Canada. What we do is we help car dealers finance their operations. And one of their ongoing requirements is to look for opportunities for sustainability. And that's going to require financing in a lot of cases. So great opportunity for us to bring solutions to the table and help them grow their business. And thanks, Adam, for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for joining. Silvia, so I'm going to put you on the spot first. You spend a lot of time with dealer principals, dealer groups, and the OEMs. From both of their perspectives, how are they thinking about the future of a dealership? What does that look like from the inside and the outside? Maybe walk us through some examples and where you see this shift going.
Absolutely. The transformation has been ongoing, and the future of the automotive retail space, we're working towards that. So we're seeing examples of that already. It's going to continue to evolve in this manner. So we're seeing the spaces being utilized in ways that are different than we traditionally use them. Less of a transaction space and more of an experience space. I mean, we're still transacting at the dealership, but there's more congruency between how customers are interacting with the brands themselves, offline and online. So we're bridging that in. A lot more technology, more immersive experiences inside the space with the use of technology. So it's being augmented. And we're seeing a lot of electrification underway. A lot of improvements and a groundbreaking for being ready for the future and being relevant in a new landscape with a hybrid product and a full EV product as well. And sustainability is a big part of that equation as well. So we're already starting to see OEMs and dealers taking steps and looking at what are their carbon emissions, starting to establish their baseline and looking at ways of how they can roadmap committed reductions. So we're starting to see a lot of that, and the dealership of the future will have all of these components in their existence.
Thank you. And so how fast do you see that change happening? We don't need to get into different brands or OEMs, but how would you characterize the response at the dealer level? Where do you find the common ground? How are they making progress together as they go down this path of decarbonization or sustainability?
In some ways, it's early days still.
Sure.
Brands have made public commitments, right, that they want to be more sustainable all around. And the dealership is an extension of the brand to a great extent. Customers are coming to the brand first, and then the community space of the dealership is second. So ensuring that there's alignment with where the brand stands on sustainability, we're seeing some OEMs taking more steps to assist their dealers in understanding where they're at and starting to look at ways of how we can look at the operating model a little differently, look at the buildings a little differently. So there are steps starting to take place in that regard.
That's great. We'll turn to you in just a moment to talk about some of the building standards and improvements. But Ethan, you've also been to a lot of new dealership openings.
Yep.
What are you seeing maybe over the last, I think pre-COVID, now that we're back in the new normal? What have you seen then? What are you seeing now?
Sure.
What's the general reaction when people are at these dealerships?
Well, no doubt COVID actually changed the mentality in many cases as to how a dealership is going to develop and what their strategy is going to look like going forward. fair to say that there's an assumption that for a lot of brands, there's going to be less inventory. So the footprint, may actually shrink compared to what we were seeing pre-COVID. I think that the dealers will prefer to have a smaller footprint in a lot of cases. It's cheaper to build, but also more emphasis on their back end, on their service department, looking for increased capacity from a service perspective, maybe not necessarily having as much floor space for demonstrating vehicles or having vehicles on display. More open concept, I would say, is pretty prevalent in the dealership space as opposed to closed-in offices, more collaborative sort of approaches. Certainly, more receptive to more efficient, energy consuming sorts of technologies, whether it's converting to LED lighting, high-speed, service doors, looking at high efficiency windows, high efficiency HVAC equipment, potentially looking at, installing green roofs, recycling rainwater. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for them to look for these types of strategies to, establish and maintain a more attractive level of sustainability. And I would say that, ultimately at the end of the day, it's still about dollars and cents. And there's a great opportunity for our dealer principals to take into consideration the efficiency opportunities that are out there. Long term, it's going to save them money. Short term may cost them more, but long term, there's a quick payback in some cases, and in many cases, it makes the dealership more attractive, as an asset as well.
And so on that note, James, you are oftentimes speaking at lots of conferences, focusing a lot on decarbonization. What are you seeing just across various industries? How owners are dealing with their real estate footprint? What kind of changes are they making? Maybe talk a little bit about that broadly, and then obviously we'll pull from that on the dealership level.
Yeah, no, Ethan actually kind of preview some of the measures that building owners and operators are taking. So that was a great jumping off point there. I think the big thing to know here is that buildings are a major source of emissions in Canada and the US. And governments at different levels, whether that's the federal government or municipal level, municipal governments are beginning to pay more attention to that in forms of regulation. So you're seeing it in cities in the States like New York and Denver, some of the Californian cities, you're seeing it in Toronto, you're seeing it in Vancouver. What's actually happening is these municipalities are regulating building through some emissions. It's starting from larger buildings, getting down to kind of smaller buildings. So immediately only the largest dealerships will be touched, but it will get down to kind of all buildings in time. Now, Ethan made a really, really interesting kind of distinction when it comes to decarbonization. There's almost the short, quick hit measures that you can take, the no regrets moves.
Sure.
And then there's the big lifts that are really going to reduce the carbon emissions materially. Some of these quick hit measures are just simply using less energy, working out those simple payback measures to use less energy. LED lighting is something that many dealerships will have probably done already, but you can think creatively about shading, green roofs, and these kind of passive measures to reduce the amount of electricity and gas that you're consuming as a really, really good kind of short payback way of driving down energy usage and decarbonization. I'm going to be honest, the big hit kind of measure is taking the dealership off natural gas as a source of heating and onto electricity, onto heat pumps. That honestly is not a move to be taken lightly. It's a move that needs to be sequenced in a way that makes most financial sense for the dealership. So what that usually means is that when your furnace kind of runs out of economic life, that's the time to make the switch. It isn't necessarily right now. So what I would say is for dealers, to have that strategy, to understand when their major pieces of capital equipment, their furnaces are coming up for end of life. Think about when re-imaging is also happening, because that can be a good time to kind of make some of these changes, and think about regulations. So the takeaway for me, I think, is dealers do need to kind of educate themselves about their equipment, about the regulations that are coming, about what OEMs are requiring, and about when their next re-imaging is, with regards to some of these bigger hit kind of decarbonization measures.
That's great, thank you.
I think that's a good point, if I can segue.
Yeah,
It's a really respectful dialogue to have with dealers if they're having an image program that they need to pay attention to and invest in. That's the time when we're looking at, do we have enough infrastructure to be relevant and thrive in 5, 10, 15 years from now. So it's at that time that we're having the conversations about okay, what are the investments that we need to phase in, and can we do them in one go, or do we need to phase some in? So if you're breaking ground, you're breaking ground, not just for your renovation and your new image program, but you're also future-proofing with the right conduits, perhaps, filtering in some, photovoltaic and some things that, will expand the sustainability presence of your dealership and your operating model.
Right.
Good point.
And all these really lead to a shift in mindset and culture at the dealership, right? So if you think about sort of a top-down approach, dealer principals or the general managers, coaching folks on sustainability, getting people to buy in, making sure that there's a vested interest. If you step back and think about culture, what have you seen, maybe a good sign of someone implementing a good culture to have a flexible and adaptable workforce? What are some examples where maybe it hasn't worked? A lot of experience in the dealership space. So maybe you can talk a bit about culture and how training may influence that.
Sure. Well, I think the culture starts at the top.
Yeah.
You have to have somebody that's going to champion, a sustainability approach. I think that it's important for the dealer principal to buy into that sort of vision, and it's important to also have champions within the dealership itself.
Mm-hmm.
They're also going to take ownership for encouraging, the strategies and encouraging knowledge about what sustainability is and how they can support sustainability going forward. I think it's also, another critical component is from the manufacturer itself. If the manufacturer has a vision of being a more sustainable corporate entity, then I think that it also encourages the dealers to buy into that vision as well, and buy into that strategy. And we see brands that have obviously a very visible commitment to the environment, where the dealers very much buy into that vision, and we see other situations where there's some resistance from the dealer itself to the manufacturer's vision. So it really comes down to the culture within the dealership itself that is critical.
I'm kind of interested to know what your experiences are with dealers' concerns around sustainability, because I almost have the kind of, my theory, my hypothesis is that it almost feels like too much too soon, like too much is being demanded, too much is being expected. I mean, the point that I was kind of almost trying to get at a little bit earlier is it doesn't have to be everything all at once. You need to have a strategy, but that strategy needs to work with your financial objectives, with your daily operations, with your brand. It doesn't have to be everything all at once, but it does have to be something you're thinking about now. Is that fair around how?
That's a fair statement. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, dealers are for-profit entities, so a lot of it comes down to what's the cost, what's the benefit, and what's the payoff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that is one of the primary focuses, is how do I spend the right amount of money and get the right return. And I think that ultimately the decision is going to come down to how strong is the dealership. If this dealership is struggling, it's going to be much more difficult for them to invest in a footprint that is going to be more environmentally friendly, less or an investment in a footprint that's going to be more efficient, cost money.
Yeah.
And if you're a dealer that is struggling, or a dealer that maybe is in the process of going to market to sell themselves, chances are there's going to be less focus on investing in the dealership itself to sustain the future. On the flip side, there are dealers that obviously want to increase the value of the dealership itself, want to obviously encourage sustainability, and they understand the payoff metrics, which can be longer term, and in some cases you hit the nail on the head. They're going to take steps. It's not going to be all done at once. It'll be done on a priority basis. Where's my biggest bang for the buck? How can I realize the quickest return? That's probably the first thing that's going to get done. And those that are a longer term payoff, maybe those investments will be delayed.
And so it's one of your earlier points. You're seeing that when they start to segment out or schedule out their investments, probably aligns with what these things.
Absolutely. And, let's call it out. There's a lot of transformation, and I don't know that I've seen this level of transformation outside of automotive. Sure. So not only do we have a different labor force than we ever had, right? Technology, the rate of change, it's so much faster than it ever was. So they're contending with, like every other business is contending with all of this transformation. But then layer in that their product is completely different. So that product now has a trickle effect onto even their people strategy. You know, how do you attract and retain the right people and the right customer journey? So there's the online, the offline, there's just a lot coming at them. So there's a lot of competition for those finite resources. What do you do first? Then you add in sustainability to it, and it's like, okay, well, show me the business case, because it's just, I don't know where to split myself, out any differently. And so I think that's where, while the sentiment might be there that everybody wants to be greener, sure, why not? Why can't we do things better than we did? Why can't we, have, more cost-effective operations going, longer term if we make the investments now? But it's just competing for those investments, and even understanding, that ROI on the long term. So sometimes there's not enough business cases or examples to be able to, shift everybody over and have that momentum. But I think the sentiment is right. Again, varies by dealership, but you have to start there, and also query your customers and your team, because it isn't, like you said, a one and done. We build a great facility and we have things in place that make us more operationally efficient and more sustainable. It's an ongoing occupant behavior, customer behavior. You're maintaining that level of sustainability and building on it. So there's just a lot coming out there. I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely, and agreed.
When you mentioned shift, I think a little bit about the elections down south. Under 100 days until there may or may not be a new sheriff in town. And so how do you think about the topic of sustainability? Some OEMs, this is very much roundtable, so some OEMs have signaled they're going to wait and see what happens down south. Others have not. And so how do you think about, the goal setting at the OEM level, the political backdrop? There's always a conversation here in Canada. It's unfortunately at times a political discussion, but at the end of the day, dealers want to make money, OEMs want to sell cars, everybody wants to do what's right. How do you think about election cycles and then how that may or may not impact sustainability?
I guess the points that I would make, though, is I do firmly believe the general trend towards decarbonization is established.
Yeah.
And the president or prime minister is not the only actor that is driving that. You've got the federal government, you've got state or provincial governments, you've got municipalities, you've got regulators. And as you look across the broad landscape of all that, the direction of travel is established. I'd also say the direction of technology is established globally. Although EV adoption may not be a linear kind of upwards curve in North America, if you look at China, the cost of producing EVs there, greater than 50% penetration of EVs into the Chinese marketplace. This technology is scaling very, very rapidly globally. So I understand concerns about the US presidential election, but I would say that if you are over-anchored on that, you're going to be missing the big picture.
Yeah.
And the big picture is a greater trend towards sustainability and decarbonization.
It's going to be really interesting to see how the governments react, because there's all sorts of noise with respect to tariffs being placed on Chinese vehicles. It's happening in the States. I think the federal government in Canada is now considering what their strategy is going to be. And there's a lot of resistance from the manufacturers as well, because they're concerned about the fact that, a very, very aggressive and successful manufacturer could be coming into North America with a very affordable product. I think they want to protect labor on the one side, but they also want to protect let's call it the industry on the other side as well. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how this all plays out.
But I agree that I think what's in motion will stay in motion. So we're going to continue seeing more EVs. We're going to continue seeing, customer sentiment towards, transacting with businesses that are more responsible in business practices and in sustainability, and transparently with sustainability and their promises and what they're doing. So that's not going to go away. In addition to all of the, municipal energy code, building codes, they've already, stepped up and, have started to change to have more sustainable building elements incorporated into all facilities. So we're not going to go back. Maybe the timeline to, make the switch is not going to be from 0 to 100 overnight. So this is where, just having a good level understanding of what's in place, when do I need to get to where I need to get to, and start planning, and, be nice to your bankers who can help you, support you along the way there, because it will take resources. It will take some cost.
Yeah.
And it does take a good mindset as well, right? But from your community, your staff, top down, to be able to initiate what needs to be in place.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that we could address a few, elephants in the room from a topic perspective. This was great. I think we could probably do a part 2 and a part 3, but want to thank the
Just
three
on
of
the
you.
election
Yeah.
alone.
Want to thank the three of you for making time. I really appreciate all your thought and effort that goes into this. And to everyone dialing in online and watching on YouTube or listening from the podcast, thank you for choosing to give us some of your time. We really appreciate you, and feel free to reach out to any of your relationship managers or contact us if you want to continue the conversation. And last but not least, Silvia, how can people find you online?
www.weis.ca.
Well, with that, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.